I haven't slept properly in 3 years. Every time I close my eyes, I'm back there, 23,000 feet above sea level, where the air is so thin, your thoughts become slow and heavy, and where something that shouldn't exist watched us from the mountains. My name is Marcus Webb, former Navy SEAL Team 6 operator, and what I'm about to tell you is classified information that cost 2 good men their lives and nearly drove the rest of us to madness. The Navy will deny this mission ever happened. The DoD has no record of our deployment. Officially, I was stateside in Virginia during the winter of 2019, but the frostbite scars on my hands tell a different story. So do the nightmares. So does the fact that my team leader, Lieutenant Commander James Richard, walked into the Pacific Ocean 6 months after we returned and never came back. Before we go any further, I need you to do something for me. Hit that subscribe button right now, because what I'm about to share will challenge everything you think you know about what's hidden in the most remote corners of our planet. And if you make it to the end of this story, if you can handle what we found up there in the ice, leave a comment telling me whether you think we should have kept climbing, because that decision, that one choice, changed everything. It started in a windowless room at Naval Base Coronado, December 2019. 6 of us were pulled from our regular rotation without explanation. When a SEAL gets summoned to an unscheduled briefing, you know it's either something extremely important or extremely dangerous, usually both. The briefing room was cold, which seemed appropriate in hindsight. Commander Richard sat at the head of the table, his expression more grim than I'd ever seen it, and I'd seen him after missions that went sideways in ways that still aren't declassified. Beside him sat 2 people I didn't recognize. A woman in her 50s with severe gray hair pulled back tight, wearing a suit that screamed CIA, and a man who looked like he hadn't slept in weeks, dressed in civilian clothes with a Stanford University pin on his jacket. "Gentlemen," Richard began, his voice flat and professional, "what you're about to hear does not leave this room. You will not discuss it with your families, your friends, or anyone else in your unit. As far as anyone is concerned, you're being deployed to Norway for cold weather training exercises. Clear?" We all nodded. This wasn't unusual. Half of what we did couldn't be talked about anyway. The woman stood up and clicked a remote. A satellite image appeared on the screen. A vast expanse of white and gray. Mountains so massive they looked like the bones of the earth pushing through skin. "The Himalayas," she said. Her voice was crisp, East Coast educated. Specifically, a region in the Tibetan Plateau near the border with China. 3 weeks ago, a Chinese research station in this area went dark. 14 scientists and support staff. No communication, no distress signal, just silence. She clicked again. A grainy photograph of a small cluster of buildings appeared, perched on what looked like the edge of the world. The Chinese government has made quiet inquiries through back channels. Officially, they're claiming equipment failure due to weather. Unofficially, they're terrified. The last transmission they received from the station was... She paused, glancing at the Stanford professor. "Unusual." The professor cleared his throat and stood. His hands were shaking slightly as he picked up a tablet. "My name is Dr. Richard Sato. I'm a cryptolinguist and archaeologist. The last transmission from the Chinese station wasn't in Mandarin. It wasn't in any modern language." He pressed play on the tablet. "What came through the speakers made every hair on my body stand up. It was a human voice, male, screaming in terror. But underneath the screams were sounds that seemed to bypass my ears and hit something more primal in my brain. Rhythmic, almost musical. Wrong." The recording lasted 15 seconds. When it ended, the room was dead silent. "That language," Dr. Sato continued, "shares phonetic similarities with a dead Tibetan dialect that hasn't been spoken in over 700 years. But that's not the strangest part. Mixed into the transmission were sounds that don't match any known human vocal capabilities. Some of the frequencies are lower than the human larynx can produce." Peterson, our medic, spoke up. "So what are we talking about here? Indigenous people? Russian black ops?" The CIA woman shook her head. "We considered both, but the location makes indigenous contact unlikely. It's too remote, too high. And satellite imagery shows no evidence of any other nation's presence in the area. Whatever happened at that station, it wasn't a conventional attack." Richard leaned forward. "Here's what we know. 2 days before the station went silent, they reported finding something. A cave system exposed by glacial melting. The research team entered the caves to take samples. After that, their communications became erratic. Mentions of structures, symbols, and on their final day, repeated references to something they called the Tall Ones. The Tall Ones? That was Kowalski, our breacher, always quick with the questions. No clarification was ever provided, the CIA woman said. Your mission is threefold. 1. Locate any survivors from the Chinese station and extract them. 2. Secure any research data or artifacts they recovered from the caves. 3. Document what's in those caves and determine if it poses any strategic threat to U.S. interests. Morris, our communications specialist, raised his hand. Ma'am, with respect, this sounds like a job for scientists, not SEALs. We sent scientists. Her expression darkened. The Chinese sent 14 of their best. You're the cleanup crew, gentlemen, and you're bringing Dr. Sato with you, because if there's writing in those caves, we need to know what it says. I remember looking around at my teammates. Jackson, our sniper, was staring at the photo of the mountains with an unreadable expression. DeMarco, our demolitions expert, was grinding his jaw the way he did before we inserted into hostile territory. We all felt it. Something was off about this mission. Richard stood up. You leave in 48 hours. This is a no-fail mission, gentlemen. Whatever's up there, we need to know about it before anyone else finds it. Pack for extreme cold weather operations. You'll be dropped at a forward staging area in Nepal, then you'll hike in. Total time at altitude, estimated 7 to 10 days. Medical has high altitude meds ready for you. You'll also be carrying experimental oxygen systems developed for exactly this kind of terrain. The CIA woman added one more thing before we were dismissed. Officially, if something goes wrong, we can't acknowledge you. The Chinese can't know we're there, and we can't risk an international incident. You're ghosts on this one. Ghosts. The word seemed appropriate, though not for the reasons she intended. 48 hours later, we were on a military transport plane heading toward Nepal. Dr. Sato sat apart from us, reviewing files on a ruggedized laptop, his face illuminated by the blue screen glow. He looked small and fragile compared to us, wrapped in an oversized cold-weather jacket that swallowed his thin frame. The flight took 18 hours, with one refueling stop. We spent it checking our gear, reviewing topographical maps, and not talking about the recording. But I could tell we were all thinking about it. Those sounds, that voice.
We landed at a small airstrip in northern Nepal just after dawn. The air was already thin, and we were only at about 12,000 feet. A local guide named Pemba met us with pack animals, sturdy mountain ponies that looked completely unimpressed by our presence. "Very bad place you go," Pemba said in broken English as we loaded our gear. He was weathered and ancient looking, though he couldn't have been older than 50. "My father's father tells stories of old places in ice, saying nothing that climbs up comes back same." Richter handed him a stack of bills. "We'll be fine. Just get us to the base camp coordinates." Pemba took the money but didn't look happy about it. 3 days to where you go. Maybe 4 if weather bad. Past that, I not go further. Those mountains, he pointed to the towering peaks ahead of us, their tops hidden in clouds. They hungry. We started hiking at 800 hours. The first day was manageable. We followed ancient trade routes through valleys where the wind carved the rock into alien shapes. We passed a few small villages where people watched us with expressions that weren't quite fear, but weren't far from it either. Word had clearly spread that foreigners were heading toward the forbidden peaks. Dr. Sato struggled with the altitude. By the second day, he was moving slow, his breathing labored. Morris had to carry some of his gear, which the professor seemed embarrassed about. "I've spent 20 years studying these mountains," Sato said during a rest break, gulping down water. "Reading about them, analyzing ancient texts. But being here," he looked up at the massive peaks looming over us. "The texts talk about places where reality is thin, where the world of the living and the world of the forgotten touch. I always thought it was metaphorical. Now I'm not so sure." "Forgotten?" I asked. "Not dead?" "The texts are very specific," he said. "Not dead, forgotten. There's a difference in Tibetan cosmology. The dead move on. The forgotten remain, caught between what was and what could never be again." Peterson, checking Sato's vitals, interrupted. "Doc, your oxygen saturation is dropping. You need to take it easier." But Sato wasn't listening. He was staring at something ahead of us on the trail. A stone cairn, ancient and weathered, with symbols carved into the rocks. He got up and walked toward it, ignoring Peterson's protests. His fingers traced the symbols. "Warning," he whispered. "This marks a boundary. Beyond this point, the old powers still hold dominion. That's what it says. But there's another line underneath, harder to read." He leaned closer. "Those who climb higher become less. Those who see the truth cannot unsee." "Cheerful," Kowalski muttered. Richter consulted his GPS. "We're still 10 clicks from the coordinates. Let's move." We pushed past the cairn. The temperature dropped noticeably as we climbed higher. The landscape became increasingly alien. Vast expanses of rock and ice with no vegetation, no animals, no sound except the wind. It felt like we were leaving Earth behind, crossing into somewhere that never wanted human feet to tread. On the third day, we reached the forward operating point where we'd camp before making the final push to the Chinese station. Pemba refused to go further, exactly as he promised. "You good men," he said to Richter, "but you go where old things live now. Those old things, they don't like when new things come. They especially don't like when new things remember what should be forgotten." "What do you mean?" I asked. Pemba looked at me with eyes that had seen too much. "The ice up there, it preserves. Not just bodies, memories, knowledge, things that should have died when the world was young. Chinese men, they found something that should stay buried. Now you go to same place. You think you hunt for truth?" He shook his head. "Truth up there does hunting."
He left before the sun set, taking the ponies and heading back down the mountain faster than I thought possible for a man his age. That night, camping at 20,000 feet, we huddled in our cold weather tents while the wind screamed outside like a living thing. The temperature dropped to 30 below zero. Our experimental oxygen systems worked well, but nothing could stop the cold from seeping into your bones at this altitude. I was on watch around 0200 hours when I heard it. Singing. Faint, distant, but unmistakable. A human voice, rising and falling in a melody that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. The same wrong quality from the recording we heard in the briefing. I immediately woke Richter. He grabbed his rifle and joined me outside the tent. "You hear that?" I asked. He listened for a long moment, his breath forming ice crystals in the air. "I don't hear anything." But his expression told me he was lying. He heard it. We all heard it, though nobody wanted to admit it. The singing continued for 20 minutes, then stopped as suddenly as it started. We didn't sleep much after that. We reached the Chinese research station at 1400 hours on the 4th day. It was worse than we expected. The facility consisted of 4 buildings connected by enclosed walkways, all designed to withstand extreme weather. Solar panels covered the roofs and satellite dishes pointed toward the sky. From the outside, it looked intact. No damage from avalanche or storm. No signs of attack. But it was completely silent. "Thermal imaging shows no heat signatures," Jackson reported, scanning through his scope. "Either nobody's home or nobody's alive." We approached tactically, weapons ready. Richter took point, with Peterson and me flanking. Kowalski covered our 6, while Morris and DeMarco set up a perimeter. Dr. Sato stayed back until we cleared the buildings. The main door was unlocked. That was our first bad sign. At this altitude, in this cold, you didn't leave doors unlocked. Heat was life, and every opening was a liability. "Federal agents were coming in," Richter called out in Mandarin, even though we all knew we weren't federal agents and nobody was going to answer. The interior was dark except for emergency lighting, and cold. Not outside cold, but not much better. Whatever heating system they'd used was offline. We found the first body in the common area. A man, Chinese, maybe 35, sitting at a table with his head down on his arms like he'd fallen asleep. He wore expedition clothes, and a mug of tea sat next to his head, frozen solid. Peterson checked him. Dead for at least 2 weeks. Frozen solid. No obvious wounds, no signs of trauma. It's like he just stopped. We cleared the rest of the main building. 2 more bodies, both in the same state. Just sitting or lying down, frozen, no signs of struggle or injury. "This doesn't make sense," Morris said. "Why would they let themselves freeze? They had heat, they had supplies." Dr. Sato had joined us by then. He was examining symbols carved into the walls, fresh carvings, done recently with something crude. "These weren't here in the original building plans," he said. "The research team carved these. They're prayers, protection spells from ancient Tibetan Buddhism, but corrupted somehow. Wrong. Like someone was trying to remember them but couldn't quite get the details right." Check the other buildings, Richter ordered. Building 2 was the sleeping quarters. We found 5 more bodies, all in their bunks, frozen. It looked like they'd simply gone to sleep and never woken up. Building 3 was the laboratory. This was where things got strange.
Research equipment was scattered everywhere, paper strewn across every surface. Photographs covered one wall, hundreds of them, all showing the same thing. A cave entrance, dark and massive, carved into a glacier. And in the photographs, barely visible in the darkness of the cave, there were shapes, tall shapes, too tall to be human. The tall ones, Dr. Sato whispered. On the main computer terminal, someone had typed the same phrase over and over, filling what looked like 100 pages of text. Do not look at them. Do not look at them. Do not look at them. Jesus, Peterson muttered. Morris was working on the computer. Most of the data is corrupted, but I'm pulling what I can. There are voice recordings, video files. Wait, his face went pale. There's something else. A document titled Final Report, last modified the day before they went dark. He opened it. What we read made the temperature in the room feel even colder. Dr. Lin Wei, chief researcher. We should never have entered the third chamber. I am writing this as a warning to whoever finds this station. Turn back. Destroy the entrance to the caves if you can. Do not make the same mistakes we did. The structures in the third chamber are not natural. They are not human. The architecture defies our understanding of physics and geometry. Angles that shouldn't exist. Spaces that are larger on the inside than the outside. Corridors that loop back on themselves in ways that make your eyes hurt to follow. But the structures are not the worst of it. They are still there. The builders, the tall ones. We thought they were statues at first, stone figures frozen in time, standing in alcoves throughout the chambers. But they are not statues. They are something else, something waiting. Chen was the first to realize. He approached one to take measurements. When he got within 3 meters, it moved. Not like a living thing moves. Like reality around it shifted, and it was suddenly in a different position, closer to him. Chen started screaming, not from pain, there was no injury, but from what he was seeing. He said the tall one was showing him everything, every moment of his life, every possible future, every death he could die, all happening at once. His mind couldn't process it. We pulled him back, but the damage was done. Chen hasn't spoken since. He just sits and stares at nothing, tears running down his face. 2 more of our team approached the tall ones despite our warnings. Same result. They're all catatonic now, trapped in their own heads. The caves change you. The longer you're inside, the more you remember things that never happened. Childhood memories that are wrong. Conversations with people who died years ago. Dreams that feel more real than waking. Last night, I saw my daughter standing in the hallway outside my quarters. My daughter died in a car accident in 2015. I know this. I attended her funeral. But there she was, exactly as I remembered her at age 7, wearing the dress she was buried in, asking me why I left her alone in the cold ground. I know it wasn't real, but it felt real. That's what this place does. It makes the impossible feel inevitable. We are not leaving the station anymore. Some of us believe that if we stay inside, stay quiet, the tall ones will leave us alone. Others have given up entirely. They sit in their rooms and wait for the end. I am writing this because someone needs to know what's down there. The cave system extends for miles. The structures go deeper than we explored. And in the deepest chamber we reached, there were symbols on the walls. A language older than any human civilization, carved by hands that were not human. Dr. Sato from Stanford would give anything to see this, but I hope he never does. The symbols tell a story. I've been trying to translate them with our database software. It's not complete, but I understand enough. This place was a prison, a tomb, built by something ancient to contain something even more ancient. The tall ones are not the prisoners, they are the guards. And whatever they were guarding is still here, somewhere deeper in the ice, waiting for someone to break the seals that bind it. We did not break the seals. We were not that foolish. But we were in the caves for too long. We saw too much. And I think something saw us back. It followed us home. Every night, I hear singing outside the station. The same melody, over and over. Beautiful and terrible. When I close my eyes, I see corridors of ice stretching forever, and at the end of them, something vast and cold is turning its attention toward us. Some of my team want to go back into the caves. They say they hear it calling them. They say it promises to show them wonders beyond human comprehension. I've locked the equipment room to prevent them from taking cold weather gear. I don't know how much longer I can maintain order. I don't know how much longer I can maintain my own sanity. To whoever finds this, we failed. We opened something that should have stayed closed. Our presence here has already attracted attention from organizations that do not have humanity's best interests at heart. If you are reading this, leave immediately. Do not enter the caves. Do not look for the tall ones. And whatever you do, do not answer when they call your name, because they will call your name. Once you know they exist, they know you exist. I can hear my daughter crying in the walls now. She wants me to let her in. I think I'm going to open the door. The document ended there. We stood in silence for a long moment, processing what we just read. This is insane, Kowalski finally said. This reads like a horror story, not a scientific report. But Dr. Sato was nodding slowly. It matches the legends. The ancient Tibetan texts speak of places like this. They called them the places of watching. Locations where beings from the previous age of the world were imprisoned after they lost a war against something else. The texts are unclear about what exactly they fought or why they lost. Previous age of the world? Peterson asked. Buddhist and Hindu cosmology speaks of cycles of creation and destruction. Each cycle lasts billions of years. The texts suggest that in the previous cycle, the world was ruled by beings that were not gods and not demons, but something else. Something that understood reality at a deeper level than we do. When that age ended, most of them were destroyed, but some were imprisoned in places like this, waiting for the world to forget them completely so they could finally die. But they're not dying, I said. No, Sato agreed. They're not, because we keep finding them, keep remembering them, and as long as something remembers them, they can't fully pass from existence. Richter cut through the speculation. We need to find the last building, secure any survivors, and document those caves. That's the mission. The rest is above our pay grade. Building 4 was the medical facility and emergency shelter. We found it locked from the inside. Richter knocked. This is the United States Navy. If anyone's in there, we're here to help. Nothing. Kowalski, breach it. It took 3 minutes to cut through the lock. When the door swung open, we found the last 2 members of the research team. They were alive. A woman and a man, both emaciated, huddled in the corner with blankets wrapped around them. They looked at us with eyes that had seen too much. You shouldn't have come, the woman whispered in English. It's too late. They've already seen you. Peterson moved forward slowly, hands raised to show he meant no harm. We're here to help. We're Americans. We're going to get you out of here. The woman, late 30s, Chinese, with hollow cheeks and cracked lips, laughed. It was a brittle, broken sound. Get us out? She shook her head. There is no out, not anymore. We're already too far in. You are too now. The moment you set foot in this valley, you became visible to them. The man beside her hadn't moved. He just stared at the wall, his lips moving soundlessly, like he was having a conversation with someone we couldn't see. Ma'am, I'm a medic, Peterson said gently. Let me check you both. When's the last time you ate? 4 days, she whispered. Maybe 5. Time feels strange here. Sometimes a day passes in minutes. Sometimes an hour lasts forever. She looked directly at me, and I saw something in her eyes that made my stomach turn. Not just fear, but resignation. Acceptance of something terrible. We stopped eating because we were afraid. Afraid of what? I asked. That we were already dead, she said simply. That this was some kind of afterlife, and eating would trap us here forever. Dr. Lin thought, before he went outside and didn't come back, he thought maybe we'd all died in the caves, and everything since then was just our minds trying to process being dead. Dr. Sato stepped forward carefully. Are you Dr. Mei Zhang, the geologist on the team? She nodded slowly. And this is, he gestured to the man, Tao Chen. He was our anthropologist. Her voice dropped to a whisper. He was the first one to touch the tall ones. He hasn't been right since. Most of the time, I don't think he knows where he is. Richter keyed his radio. Morris, DeMarco, status. Perimeter secure, sir. No movement, no contacts. But, sir, I'm picking up some weird readings on the equipment. Electromagnetic fluctuations that don't match anything natural. They seem to be coming from deeper in the mountains. Copy that. Stay alert. Richter turned to Dr. Zhang. We need you to tell us everything. What exactly did you find in those caves? She closed her eyes. Dr. Sato, you've studied the ancient texts, yes? The stories of the previous world cycle? I have. They're not stories, she said. They're history. Incomplete history, but history nonetheless. What we found in those caves, it's a repository, a library of the civilization that came before humanity. And it's guarded by things that are no longer alive, but haven't quite figured out how to die. Peterson was checking her vitals, giving her water in small sips. Her hands shook as she drank. Start from the beginning, Richter said, pulling out a recording device. When did you first enter the caves? 14 days ago. We'd been monitoring glacial melt patterns when our ground-penetrating radar detected massive hollow spaces beneath the ice. Structures too regular to be natural cave formations. We thought we'd found evidence of an ancient human settlement, maybe a monastery or fortress buried by an ice age. She laughed again, that same broken sound. We were so excited. Dr. Lin immediately organized an expedition team. 7 of us went down that first day. The entrance was a vertical shaft, about 4 meters wide, descending through 60 meters of solid ice. At the bottom, we found worked stone, carved walls, symbols we didn't recognize. Can you describe the symbols? Dr. Sato asked, pulling out his notebook. Geometric, mathematical. They hurt to look at directly. Gave you vertigo, like they were 3-dimensional images forced into 2-dimensional space. But that wasn't the strangest part. The strange part was that some of us could almost read them, like they were tapping into some ancient part of our brains, some inherited memory from before language. She paused to drink more water. The first chamber was enormous, cathedral-sized. The walls were covered in those symbols, arranged in patterns that seemed to shift when you weren't looking directly at them. And in the center of the chamber stood a doorway, not a door, a doorway, an arch carved from black stone that absorbed light. Looking through it, you couldn't see what was on the other side, just darkness. But you could feel something beyond it, weight, presence, attention. Tao Chen suddenly spoke, his voice rusty from disuse. They were watching us through the doorway. Even then, before we went deeper, they were deciding if we were worthy. Dr. Zhang put a hand on his arm. Tao, please, you need to rest. But he kept talking, his eyes still fixed on the wall. Not worthy of knowledge, worthy of remembering. There's a difference. Knowledge can be forgotten. But once you remember something that always was, you can never unknow it. They showed me what I really am, what we all really are. Echoes of echoes, pretending to be solid. Tao, stop, Dr. Zhang pleaded, but he was lost in whatever he was seeing. The tall ones aren't guards, he continued. They're witnesses. They're making sure we remember correctly. Making sure when we tell the story of what came before, we don't corrupt it with our own false meanings. They preserve the truth, even when the truth is so terrible that knowing it breaks your mind. Peterson injected something into Tao's arm, a sedative. Within seconds, the man's eyes closed, and he slumped against the wall. I'm sorry, Dr. Zhang said quietly. He's been like that since the 3rd chamber. Sometimes he's lucid, but mostly. Tell us about the 3rd chamber, Richter pressed. She took a shuddering breath. We went deeper. We had to. That's the thing about this place. Once you start exploring, you can't stop. It's like the caves pull you forward. Or maybe it's curiosity. Maybe it's the same drive that makes humans climb mountains and cross oceans and explore caves even when we know it might kill us. The 2nd chamber was smaller, but filled with objects. Tools, I guess, or art. Things made from materials we couldn't identify. Metal that wasn't quite metal. Stone that seemed to exist at multiple temperatures simultaneously. Cold to the touch, but giving off heat signatures. We collected samples, took photographs, documented everything. Do you still have those samples? Dr. Sato asked eagerly. They're in the lab, but I wouldn't touch them if I were you. Dr. Wu spent an hour analyzing one of the metal pieces. That night, he woke up screaming that he could see through time, that the metal had shown him every moment of his life happening simultaneously, and he couldn't figure out which moment was now. He walked into a glacier 3 days later. We found his body, but his face, it was smiling, like he'd finally figured something out. She was crying now, silent tears running down her gaunt cheeks. The third chamber is where we found them, the tall ones. Tao's right about one thing. They're not statues. I don't know what they are. Beings? Entities? They stand in alcoves carved into the walls, each one maybe 3 meters tall. Humanoid, but wrong. Too thin, too angular. Their faces are smooth, featureless, except for symbols carved where their eyes should be. And they're made of something that looks like ice, but isn't. It's crystalline, but warm to the touch. And when you stand near them, you hear singing. The same singing we heard last night, I said. She looked at me sharply. You've heard it already? Then they know you're here. They're calling to you. Calling us for what? Kowalski asked. To witness, she said. To remember. That's their purpose. They stand in the caves and preserve the memory of what came before. But they can't hold all those memories alone anymore. They're too old, too tired. They need new minds to share the burden of remembering. That's insane, Kowalski muttered. Is it? Dr. Zhang fixed him with an intense stare. What do you think happens to knowledge when everyone who knows it dies? It disappears. The tall ones are trying to prevent that. They're the last keepers of a history that predates humanity by millions of years, and they're desperate to pass it on before they finally fade. Richard stood up. We need to see these caves for ourselves. We need documentation, evidence to take back. No, Dr. Zhang said firmly. You don't understand. The more you know, the harder it is to leave. Dr. Lin spent 2 days in the caves, and after that, he couldn't function in the normal world anymore. Everything felt wrong to him. Shallow, fake. He said being outside the caves was like being trapped in a children's story when you'd already read the adult version. You could see all the simplifications, all the lies told to make reality palatable. We have our orders, Richard said. Dr. Zhang grabbed his arm. Orders? Do your orders tell you what to do when you realize that human history is a blink? That everything we've built, everything we think matters, is just noise happening on the surface while the real story plays out in deep time? Do your orders tell you what to do when you understand that consciousness isn't something humans developed? It's something we inherited from beings that made us look like insects playing at civilization? That's enough, Richard said, but his voice was uncertain now. You're going to go anyway, Dr. Zhang said, releasing his arm and slumping back. Of course you are. You're military. You follow orders. Just like we followed our scientific mandate to explore and document. She laughed bitterly. We're all the same, really. Unable to leave mysteries alone. Unable to accept that some doors should stay closed. Can you lead us there? Dr. Sato asked. She was silent for a long time. Finally, she nodded. Yes, I can lead you there. But I won't go into the third chamber again. I'll take you to the entrance, show you the way, but I won't set foot in that room again. Once was enough. We spent 2 hours preparing. Peterson stabilized Dr. Zhang and Tao Chen with fluids and nutrients. Morris uploaded all the data he could recover from the Chinese station's computers. DeMarco rigged the facility with emergency beacons so we could find our way back. The cave entrance was 3 kilometers from the station, across a glacier field that had partially collapsed, creating a labyrinth of ice walls and crevasses. Dr. Zhang led us through it, moving with the confidence of someone who'd made the journey multiple times. The temperature continued to drop. Even with our advanced cold weather gear, I could feel the chill seeping into my bones. The sky above was a pale, washed-out blue, empty of birds or clouds. Nothing lived up here, except us and whatever waited in the ice. The entrance should be just ahead, Dr. Zhang said. Her voice was muffled by her face mask, but I could hear the tremor in it. We rounded a pressure ridge and saw it. A hole in the glacier, perfectly circular, descending into darkness. Around the entrance, the ice was carved with the same symbols Dr. Zhang had described, geometric patterns that seemed to shift and writhe in your peripheral vision. My God, Dr. Sato whispered. He approached the symbols, his gloved hand hovering over them. This is it. This is old Tibetan script, but much older, pre-Buddhist, maybe pre-human. These symbols, they're instructions, a warning. It says, here lies the memory of what cannot be forgotten. Those who descend carry the weight of ages. Those who ascend carry the burden of truth. Cheerful, Jackson muttered, echoing Kowalski's earlier sentiment. Richter checked his equipment. We go in pairs. Jackson, you're with me. Webb, you're with Dr. Sato. Peterson, stay here with Dr. Zhang and Chen. Kowalski, Morris, DeMarco, maintain perimeter and manage our comms line. We go down, document what we find, and come back up. Standard cave operation protocols. Clear? We all acknowledged. Dr. Zhang grabbed my arm as I prepared to descend. When you see them, the tall ones, don't get too close. And whatever you do, don't touch them. That's what destroyed Tao. He wanted to know what they were made of, and when he touched one, she struggled for words. It opened his mind too wide, showed him everything. Humans aren't built to process everything. We're built to process pieces, to filter out most of reality so we can function. The tall ones remove those filters. I'll be careful, I promised. We descended on ropes, headlamps cutting through the darkness. The shaft was exactly as Dr. Zhang had described, carved through solid ice, the walls smooth and precise, covered in those maddening symbols. As we rappelled deeper, I felt the weight of the ice above us. 60 meters of glacier, millions of tons of frozen water, all suspended above our heads. The shaft opened into the first chamber. Even prepared for it, the size took my breath away. We were standing in a space the size of an airport hangar, carved from ice and stone. Our headlamps couldn't reach the ceiling. The walls were covered, every square centimeter, with carved symbols, arranged in spiraling patterns that seemed to pull your eye toward the center of the room. And, in the center, stood the doorway. Dr. Zhang had called it black stone, but that didn't capture it. It absorbed light so completely that looking at it made my eyes wire. The arch was maybe 4 meters tall, 2 meters wide, and through it, nothing, just darkness. But Dr. Zhang was right. You could feel something beyond it, like standing at the edge of a cliff and knowing there was a drop even if you couldn't see it. This is remarkable, Dr. Sato breathed. He was moving around the chamber, photographing everything with a specialized camera. The level of craftsmanship. This would take decades to carve, even with modern tools. And look at the mathematical precision of the symbol arrangements. These aren't decorative, they're functional, they're encoding information. Richter was examining the doorway. What do you think is through there? Another chamber, presumably, though the way it absorbs light is unusual. It might be coated with some kind of light-absorbing material. Let's find out. Richter pulled out a high-powered flashlight and shone it through the doorway. The beam didn't penetrate. It hit the darkness and stopped, as if the space beyond the doorway was made of something solid. That's not possible, Jackson said. Welcome to the Himalayas, I muttered. Dr. Zhang approached the doorway cautiously. In some of the ancient texts, there are references to void gates, thresholds between the physical world and the realm of deep memory. The texts say these gates were created by the old ones to access the place where all moments exist simultaneously. That sounds like time travel nonsense, Richter said. Not time travel, time access. The difference is crucial. Time travel implies moving from one moment to another. Time access implies experiencing all moments at once. Dr. Zhang was inches from the darkness now. If this is really a void gate, then stepping through wouldn't take you to another place. It would take you to another way of experiencing existence. Doctor, step back, Richter ordered. But Dr. Sato was transfixed. The symbols around the arch, they're not warnings, they're instructions. They're telling us how to properly prepare our minds before crossing. They're saying, he leaned closer, reading. They're saying we need to shed the illusion of linear time before we enter. We need to remember that all moments are one moment, just viewed from different angles. Sato, Richter grabbed his shoulder and pulled him back. The professor blinked, seeming to come back to himself. I'm sorry, I don't know what came over me. I felt compelled to. Everyone, stay back from that doorway, Richter commanded. We're not here to test ancient alien technology. We're here to document and extract. Jackson, set up the camera equipment. Get full coverage of this chamber. As Jackson worked, I explored the perimeter of the room. There were objects scattered around, the artifacts Dr. Jean had mentioned. Strange tools made from materials I couldn't identify. Containers filled with what looked like liquid, but didn't move like liquid. And everywhere, more symbols. Webb, come look at this, Dr. Sato called. He was examining a section of wall where the symbols seemed fresher, carved more recently. This is Chinese, he said, pointing to newer markings scratched beneath the ancient symbols. Dr. Lim's team tried to add their own annotations. Look, day 1, we have found paradise. And below that, day 2, paradise is a prison. And then, day 3, the prisoners are the guards, and we are... It cuts off there. What do you think he was going to write? I asked. We are the prisoners, Dr. Sato said quietly. I think he realized that the caves weren't trapping the tall ones. The tall ones were trying to prevent something else from getting out. And by entering the caves, by exploring deeper, the research team had become part of the prison system. A sound echoed through the chamber, a low, resonant tone that seemed to come from the stone itself. What was that? Jackson asked, his hand going to his rifle. The caves, Dr. Sato said. They're singing. The tone came again, longer this time, and I realized he was right. It wasn't a sound coming from any specific direction. It was the entire chamber resonating at a specific frequency. And underneath that tone, I could hear words. Not in English or any language I knew, but I understood them anyway, directly in my mind. You have been seen. You have been measured. Prepare to remember. Everyone's hearing this, right? I asked. Tell me I'm not crazy. We hear it, Richter confirmed, his jaw tight. Morris, are you getting the phone comms? Static crackled through our radios. Morris's voice came through, broken and distorted. Sir, interference, readings going, recommend abort. The signal died completely. Lost contact with the surface, Richter announced. Jackson, how long until the equipment is secured? 2 more minutes, sir. The singing grew louder, not in volume, but in presence. It felt like it was inside my skull, vibrating against my thoughts. Dr. Sato was swaying on his feet. It's beautiful, he whispered. Can you hear what they're saying? They're telling us the story of the world before this one. They're showing us... Sato! I grabbed him before he could walk toward the doorway. He'd been moving without seeming to realize it, drawn toward the darkness. He focused on me, and his eyes were wrong. Too wide, too aware. Marcus, he said, using my first name, though I'd never told him. Do you understand what this means? This is proof that human civilization isn't the first, proof that consciousness existed long before us and will exist long after we're gone. We're just one verse in an endless song. Doctor, I need you to focus. Can you do that? He blinked several times, and some of the wrongness faded from his eyes. Yes, I'm sorry. The acoustic properties of this chamber are affecting my cognition. We should move to... The darkness beyond the doorway rippled, like water disturbed by a stone, except the ripple moved outward instead of inward, and where it touched the air, reality seemed to warp. Richter, I shouted. We all saw it. Through the doorway, something was moving, a shape, tall and angular and wrong. It emerged slowly, and I got my first glimpse of what Dr. Zhang had called the tall ones. It was humanoid only in the broadest sense, 3 meters tall, impossibly thin, with limbs that bent at joints that shouldn't exist. Its body seemed to be made of crystalline material that refracted our headlamp light into impossible colors, shades I had no names for, hues that hurt to look at. But worst was its face, smooth and featureless except for symbols carved where eyes should be. And as it emerged fully into the chamber, those symbols began to glow with a pale, cold light. None of us moved. None of us even breathed. The tall one stood motionless for a long moment, its blank face somehow pointed directly at us. Then it raised one elongated arm and gestured toward the doorway. Come, the thought entered my mind without words. Remember. Nobody move, Richter whispered, but I could hear the fear in his voice. The tall one didn't approach us. It simply stood there, waiting, patient in a way that suggested it had been waiting for a very long time, and could wait much longer. Dr. Sato took a step forward. Doctor, stay back. I reached for him, but he shrugged me off with surprising strength. Don't you see? He said, his voice filled with wonder and terror in equal measure. It's inviting us. It wants us to witness, to carry the memory forward. Sato, that's an order, Richter barked. But the professor was beyond following orders. He walked toward the tall one slowly, like a man in a trance. The moment he crossed the threshold of the doorway, everything changed. The singing intensified 1,000-fold. The symbols on the walls began to glow, pulsing in rhythmic patterns, and Dr. Sato screamed, not in pain, but in something worse. Revelation. The sound of a mind comprehending something it was never meant to comprehend. He collapsed just inside the doorway, convulsing. I didn't think. I just moved. I crossed the threshold, grabbed Sato by his jacket, and dragged him back into the first chamber. The moment I touched him, I felt it. A flood of sensation that wasn't mine. I saw through his eyes, and through 1,000 other eyes simultaneously. I felt the weight of millions of years pressing down on my consciousness. I understood, for one terrible moment, what it meant to exist outside linear time, to experience all moments as one eternal moment. I saw the world before humans. I saw cities of glass and light that made our greatest metropolises look like anthills. I saw beings of pure thought manipulating reality like we manipulate clay. I saw the war that destroyed that civilization, a conflict fought not with weapons, but with ideas, where the battle lines were drawn between competing visions of what reality should be. And I saw why they lost. They became too powerful, too knowledgeable. They understood so much about the nature of existence that they began to unweave it, pulling at the threads of reality itself until everything started to unravel. So the survivors imprisoned themselves, created these vast tomb libraries throughout the world, places where they could preserve their knowledge while simultaneously preventing it from spreading, because they understood that knowledge of certain things is inherently dangerous, that simply knowing some truths will destroy you. All of this hit me in less than a second, and then I was back in my own mind, dragging Sato away from the doorway, both of us screaming. Jackson and Richter pulled us both further back. Sato was unconscious, blood running from his nose and ears. I was shaking uncontrollably, my mind trying to process what I just experienced. The tall one had not moved. It still stood in the doorway, patient and terrible, waiting. "We're leaving," Richter said. "Now. Jackson, forget the equipment. Everyone up the ropes. Move." But as we turned to retreat, we saw that we had a problem. The shaft we'd descended through was gone. Not blocked, not collapsed, gone. Where it had been was now solid ice, carved with those endless spiraling symbols. "What the hell?" Jackson pressed his hands against the ice. "This was here. We just came down this way." "The chamber moved," I heard myself say, my voice distant and strange. Or we moved, or time moved. The caves don't follow normal spatial rules. When I touched Sato, I saw how they work. The chambers exist in multiple states simultaneously. They shift between configurations based on who's observing them. Everyone stared at me. "Webb, you're not making sense," Richter said. "I know," I replied. "That's because what I'm describing doesn't make sense in normal physics. But that's the point. These caves were built by beings who understood reality at a level we don't. To them, space and time were just parameters that could be adjusted." "So how do we get out?" Peterson's voice crackled over the radio. They'd managed to re-establish contact. "Webb, your signals just disappeared for 20 minutes. What's happening down there?" 20 minutes. We'd been in the chamber for what felt like 5 minutes at most. "Peterson, the entrance shaft just vanished. We're trapped in the first chamber." "That's impossible, sir. I'm looking at the entrance right now. It's still here." "Then why can't we see it?" Silence on the radio. Then Peterson's voice came back, careful and controlled. "Sir, I think you need to consider the possibility that you're not in the same version of the cave that you entered. Dr. Zhang is saying something about parallel chambers, spaces that occupy the same physical location but exist in different states of reality." "That's insane," Richter said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Sir, Dr. Zhang wants to talk to you." There was a rustling sound. Then Dr. Zhang's voice came through. "Commander Richter, listen carefully. The caves have a defense mechanism. When they detect hostile intent, or when someone learns too much too quickly, they shift you into a deeper configuration. You're in a version of the first chamber that exists slightly outside normal space-time. To get back, you need to move forward." "Forward where?" Richter demanded. "Through the doorway, into the second chamber. The exit from your current state is through, not back. There's one of those things standing in the doorway." I know, you'll have to pass it, but don't look at its face. Don't make eye contact with the symbols where its eyes should be. If you do, it will show you things. Just walk past it quickly and enter the second chamber. The layout there is different. There should be multiple passages. Take the one that descends. It will feel wrong, like you're going deeper when you should be going up, but trust me, down is the way out in these caves. This is crazy, Jackson muttered. But we didn't have another choice. Behind us, the ice wall was solid. Ahead, the tall one waited in the doorway, its crystalline body catching the light and breaking it into those impossible colors. Dr. Sato was coming around, groaning. I helped him sit up. Did you see it? He whispered. Did you see what they were? Yeah, I said quietly. We can't let this knowledge die, he said urgently, gripping my arm. Whatever happens, we need to get this information back to civilization. The history books are wrong. Evolution is wrong. Everything we think we know about human origins is wrong. Right now, let's focus on not dying, I said.
Richter gathered us together. All right, here's what we're going to do. We move through that doorway single file, fast, no looking at the entity. Once we're through, we regroup in the second chamber and find the descending passage. Stay together, stay focused. Webb, can you walk? Yeah, I'm good. Then you're taking point. You had the vision or whatever. Maybe the caves will recognize you as someone who's already been initiated. That's a hell of an assumption, sir. You got a better plan? I didn't. I checked my rifle, though. I had no illusion it would do anything against the tall one if it decided to attack. Then I approached the doorway. The tall one remained motionless, its arms still extended in that eternal gesture of invitation. Up close, I could see the intricate detail of the symbols carved into its face. They pulsed with that cold light, and I could feel them trying to pull my attention, trying to make me look directly at them. I kept my eyes down and walked through the doorway. The transition was immediate and disorienting. One step, I was in the first chamber, and the next, I was somewhere else entirely. Not a different room, a different state of existence. The air was thicker here, heavy with weight that wasn't quite gravity. Sounds were muffled, as if we were underwater. And the walls of the second chamber were transparent. Not glass, not ice, something else that allowed us to see through to spaces beyond. Other chambers, other configurations of the cave system, all occupying the same location, but in different phases of reality. It was like looking through infinite panes of window, overlapping each other, each showing a different version of the same space. And in some of those versions, we could see them. Dozens of tall ones, standing in their alcoves, patient and eternal. They were all watching us. They were all watching us. I can't tell you everything that happened in those chambers. Some of it I don't remember clearly. The human mind wasn't built to process what we experienced. Some of it I remember too clearly, and those are the memories that wake me up at night, screaming. What I can tell you is that we made it out. All of us. Somehow, we found our way through the impossible geometry of those caves and emerged back into sunlight. But we weren't the same people who went in. The journey back to civilization felt like moving through a dream. Each of us was processing something too big to fit inside a normal human consciousness. We didn't talk much. What was there to say? When we reached the States, we were debriefed, documented, and classified. The mission was sealed at the highest level. The caves were marked off limits. A quiet understanding was reached with the Chinese government. Neither nation would pursue further investigation. Dr. Zhang and Tao Chen were placed in specialized care. Chen never recovered. Dr. Zhang took her own life 3 months later, leaving a note that read, "I remembered too much." But the real cost came later. 6 months after our return, Lieutenant Commander Richter walked into the Pacific Ocean and never came back. His note read, "We're not ready. We'll never be ready." Peterson had a breakdown during a training exercise. He's in a psychiatric facility now, heavily medicated, still insisting he can see through time. Jackson disappeared, just vanished one day, leaving a message. Going back. Need to understand more. Kowalski transferred to a desk job in cryptography.
obsessively searching for patterns in ancient languages. DeMarco started drinking, got discharged, barely keeping it together. Dr. Sato became the world's leading expert on prehistoric civilizations, carefully planting seeds in the academic community, preparing humanity for truths we're not ready to hear. As for me, I got out. Medical discharge for PTSD. Got married, had a kid, bought a house. I do all the normal things. But there's a part of me still in those caves, still standing in that chamber with transparent walls, still feeling those dozens of ancient eyes watching me from across multiple realities. I know things I can never unknow. I've seen truths humanity isn't ready for. And late at night, when I can't sleep, I still hear the singing. That's my story. Winter of 2019. A mission that officially never happened. The evidence is classified. The witnesses are dead, missing, or locked away. But the truth is out there, buried under the ice, guarded by beings that have stood watch since before humanity existed. And according to Dr. Sato, there are at least 7 other sites just like it around the world. We're accelerating towards something, our technology expanding faster than our wisdom. I can't help but wonder if we're approaching the same threshold that destroyed them. If this story made you think, hit that like button and subscribe. I've got more stories from my time in service, and trust me, this isn't the strangest one. Leave a comment. Is some knowledge too dangerous to possess? I wrestle with that question every day. And if you ever hear singing near ancient caves, if you see symbols that hurt to look at, turn back immediately. Some doors should stay closed. But you're human. Curiosity is in our DNA. So if you can't resist, remember, knowledge without wisdom is destruction. The tall ones are still standing guard, waiting to see if we'll finally learn the lesson. Stay safe, stay curious, stay careful.